If you're anything like me, you've probably got AI anxiety at the moment, and there's no denying it that AI is taking over lots of jobs and it's having a huge impact in the job market. So what can we do about it? So this video is looking at AI and how I feel about it and how I think it's going to affect the job market, 3D artists in particular, and my advice for those people who are just starting out or thinking about a career in this area and what the developments are going to be and how we should adapt to that. So to start off with, a report by the World Economic Forum suggests that 23% of jobs are going to be affected or disrupted by AI. So that's a quarter of jobs. And they suggest the most significant losses will be in administrative work, security, factory work, and commerce positions. They surveyed lots of companies and 75% of those surveyed said they were adopting AI technology. Now, 50% of those were expecting job creation through these AI technologies, and 25% were expecting job declines. So let's now look at the effects of that on the video games industry. And I'm looking particularly in the art side of things, but this does obviously affect all aspects as well. Recent reports have suggested that illustrators, so people like concept artists and so forth, they've seen a huge decline in jobs, particularly in the freelance sector. However, they're seeing a big increase in what are called touch-up jobs. So they're getting sent art and asked to edit it and make it look acceptable. So they're obviously companies are sending them AI work and saying, can you sort this out? Like the hands aren't working and things like that. So there's a big jump in those touch-up jobs, but there's a big dwindling in the actual creating art from the start to finish. And I think for many artists that will be disappointing because you want to create the piece yourself rather than edit someone else's. And again, this primarily affects freelance artists working on platforms such as Fiverr or Upwork and those sort of things. However, from what I've heard, more established artists are a bit more safe, particularly those that work in bigger studios, as they're not really reaching out to AI art just yet. They're still relying on those concept artists with more experience. So this obviously poses challenges for aspiring artists and those just starting out in the industry. Well, the advice I would probably give to those people is think about how maybe you could incorporate AI into your own workflow when creating art to make yourself faster and more effective. And I will talk about the legal and ethical issues about this later on, but for now I'll just give my advice on new and aspiring artists. I still think it's essential to learn the basic skills of anatomy, scene construction, colours and so forth, because it's really important to be good at those to understand what makes good art and what isn't so good. So if you are working with AI, you can tell when something's gone wrong and when something looks good and choose the right ones accordingly. It will also give you an advantage when you're kind of communicating with AI, so prompt engineering at the moment anyway, whether that changes or not, but you'll still need to communicate with the machine in some way to bring out your vision. And a knowledge of those basics will be really absolutely essential. The more technical aspects of the program, so pressing this particular button to do that, won't be as important as we go through. Those fundamental skills will be though. It is difficult to say what's going to happen with the more complex aspects of a 3D program, for example, topology or UV unwrapping or baking and those sort of things, which are really quite frustrating. Rigging is another one. Hopefully, I'm really hoping that AI will kind of take over those aspects, but a basic knowledge of them will still be essential. So understanding how topology works, where you want to put your lines and poles, or edge flow and poles, I should say, those sort of things, or UV unwrapping, where do we want the seams, so we can tell when the AI gets it wrong, or we need to adapt things according to different situations. So again, it is my opinion, but I really feel like the fundamentals and the basics are going to be all important moving forwards with AI. Now, my next thought as AI comes into our industry, and it's already doing this, as I've said before, it's going to start taking away those basic sort of entry-level jobs. So beginner artists trying to move into the industry are going to find it tough. For those new artists, I think it's important to try and move a step up, if this makes sense, jumping up the chain and thinking about how you could perhaps work with AI in order to boost your productivity. Maybe that gives you the opportunities of joining a team of like-minded people where you've got some coders combined with you as an artist. Combined with AI, you can probably come out with something a lot more than you could if you were just doing the basic art all by yourself and they were doing the coding all by themselves. With the advent of AI, it gives us the opportunity to kind of break down those barriers to those AAA studios and maybe start producing better quality stuff faster on our own. And my thinking behind this idea of jumping up a step is when I first got into the industry, my first thoughts were, I want to make a game or a film. And then I quickly realized that that was very difficult to do on your own. And so you need to specialize. So I'll specialize in the art side of things. And then you realize that that's big in itself and you need to specialize. So 3D and then a 3D artist. So I'm very sort of particular on that. And within 3D art, there's absolute masses. There's rigging, there's character modeling or whatever it might be. So you really have to specialize, or you did in the past, but perhaps AI is going to give us these opportunities to step back out again and think, oh, hang on, can I make a game by myself with the aid of something like AI? And I'm probably being very optimistic about these technologies. Perhaps there is a pessimistic side, and I'll come to that later. But I do want to think about the opportunities out there to encourage people that it's not all doom and gloom for our industry, and what the possibilities, the opportunities are. So if I was starting out again and I want to make a game or a film, I'd probably think about myself as a general artist, getting lots of different skills, using AI to try and produce work, still work on the fundamentals, of course, the basics. It's really important so you can understand and work with the AI properly, and work with a small team trying to produce a game or a film or something like that. I think that's really exciting that those opportunities are now opening up for us. Now you might be thinking, well, there's no point in that because AI is going to even outdo us on those levels. And my basics of fundamentals of anatomy and so forth, AI is just going to get so much better than I can be, and there's no point. Well, there is optimism within this area. Lots of analysts and experts are suggesting that we're more likely to work with AI as a tool rather than it taking us over altogether. I think taking us over altogether, in terms of our jobs that is a long way into the future, so we're fairly safe there. And I will talk a little bit about the distant future. I'm thinking 10 to 15 years, but we'll discuss that a bit later on. And I really agree with those analysts that it will be a tool and we will be using it, collaborating with it to come out with more and better art. Hence why I feel like we can be more productive and therefore move up that level, hopefully. And the reason I have some confidence in this happening is if you look at the realm of chess, where computers have been able to beat humans really easily for quite some time now. However, computers combined with human beings are still beating the computers. So there is still a need for humans in that chess process. And also saying that, we haven't lost the joy, or I haven't anyway, I like chess, I haven't lost the joy of watching players play other players. So just because computers are kind of solved and won chess, it doesn't take away that interest in my mind anyway. So for me, there is a positive element to AI. Now, I know there's going to be people out there who are hugely frustrated about it, hugely angry about it, and I completely understand and appreciate that opinion. To quickly summarize some of those legal and ethical issues, the AI programs have scraped, as it's known, images off the internet in order to learn how to create art. So they're not directly copying, but some people would argue they are directly copying. And it gets a bit more muddy, especially when you can use a prompt of a specific artist and get their style. So I can really understand how that can upset people and annoy people, make them angry. And there's lots of people out there saying boycott AI art. And I really do understand that. And you can unsubscribe from me for having a positive attitude or take on this. I understand where you're coming from. So there's the obvious ethical issue that the AI art has learned from the artists and has copied them in order to replace them. And yes, I understand the ethical issues. There's also legal issues as well. There's Getty Images that are suing Stable Diffusion and Midjourney. So Getty Images is a stock image site, and they've obviously, well, Stable Diffusion, Midjourney and others have scraped their images. It's quite clear because their logo appears in some of the images that the AI creates. That lawsuit is still ongoing, and it's debatable as to whether anything will come from this. It's not as simple as it first might seem because they're not directly copying it, although some would argue they are directly copying it. It's a very confusing subject, and you can understand why there's this legal framework which people are feeling has been broken. And there's calls for more legality to be put in place behind this so people's work isn't stolen. Unfortunately, the way I see it is that the damage has already been done. And I know that's a very sort of dismissive way of looking at it, but I can't see these technologies ever being uninvented, as it were. And I do certainly see the point that there's a question of ethics about scraping people's work like that. And whilst I appreciate there's an ethical issue in the way the AI has been created, I feel like this was coming anyway. And let's say they had done it in a more ethical way, the tide is still with them in terms of AI coming and being able to produce this art. They'd find other ways to do it. So yes, it was unethical, but it would still be with us. It would just maybe be, or delay it slightly if they hadn't done it that way. Hopefully that makes sense. Also, I don't really think these lawsuits are going to be that effective. What usually happens in these cases, especially as there's a lot of money involved and a lot of money to be made by these AI companies, we're probably going to see that they'll be slapped with a fine of some description. It may be an astronomical fine, but it's still not enough to stop AI art in its tracks. It's still coming, it's still there. In fact, the database would just probably be used by someone else. If that company went under, there'd be a new company that bought it out in some way. And I just can't see it stopping. It feels like a tidal wave that's already happened, and the lawsuit is a very small ship in this big tidal wave that's going to swallow it up, and people are going to forget about it. And even if I'm wrong on that level, AI art will still eventually be with us, and it will still be able to outperform humans in terms of speed, and in many ways, when I think of my own art, its ability as well. So for me, whilst I understand those opinions, and as an artist myself, I do have that anxiety about my job being taken. This is a bit unfair that it's scraping people's work. I think it's even scraped some of my work, would you believe it? But I know getting angry and upset about it is only going to affect me in the long run, and hence why I want to try and work with it and understand it. So I've kind of covered the next 5, maybe 10 years there where we work with AI. What about the future beyond that, where it just keeps improving and improving and it does completely replace us? Now, there is an interesting philosophical question to be had there. And I say 10 years quite deliberately because apparently there's a bit of a consensus in the AI community, the people who create AI. And it varies, of course, but a general, if you average out the thoughts, about 10 years time, maybe a little bit longer, we will see AI replacing most jobs. And I do want to talk about this because people who are just starting out in their careers are probably thinking, well, 5 to 10 years ahead, is there any point at all? And I would still argue a case that there is. It gets a little bit philosophical at this point because I think the impact of AI is far bigger than many governments and societies are really considering at the moment. But it's worth thinking about in terms of our careers and our lifestyle and so on. Now, no one really knows what impact it's going to really have on our societies, but those that are in the know seem to think it's going to be absolutely huge. It kind of splits into 2 camps, as it always does, and there's a sort of utopian positive look, and that's the one I want to focus on. There's obviously a bit of a dystopian look at it as well. But on the positive note, if all these things are automated, it should mean that we as workers have to work less. So let's say we have to work a couple of hours a week, kind of keeping up basic systems, and AI is automating everything else. And at that point, for me, that gives validity to what I'm doing at the moment, which is being a creator, producing art. I find that really fun and interesting, and that's something I would always want to do. And whether the tools change, it doesn't really matter. I still want to create and produce interesting things. And I'm very excited at the prospect of other people being able to join me in that journey and being able to do it for themselves because they'll actually have the time. Now, there's obviously a more pessimistic way of looking at this, and that's that as the jobs dry up, there's no sort of compensation for those people at all, and how on earth are they going to survive without work? And my worry is that we might go down that route, and we're kind of plodding our way towards that at the moment, with the people that create the AI having lots of wealth and those people at the bottom having nothing and no work at all. So I certainly prefer to look at the more optimistic approach, which is where we as a community, as a society, adopt these new technologies and we just have to work less and we get more time to be creative. Let's hope that's the direction it goes in. So hopefully this has given you some thoughts and maybe optimism of how to deal with this sort of anxiety that comes with these developments in AI. Like I say, I like to keep on the positive and optimistic side of these things and work with the progress that comes. And I totally understand the point of view of a pessimistic way of looking at this and the anger and the frustration that's caused by this. But I do feel like the only thing that's going to come out of that is pain for that person, because it is going to be difficult to stand up to the tide that is coming. Now, I'm happy for this conversation to continue, so do comment below with your thoughts, and you can express your frustration in the comments below. That's absolutely fine as well. I imagine those people have probably switched off already and unsubscribed already. But if you're still with me, I'd love I'm still with you, Grant. It's always nice to see people that actually listen to the end and are interested in what I have to say. Thanks very much for watching. And yeah, please do comment, because I am fascinated to hear your thoughts. I'll see you next time.